$50 for my useless wife, my husband said into the microphone. For half a second, the ballroom stayed perfectly still. Then a few people laughed, because Grant was smiling, and because people at charity galas often laughed before they decided whether something was funny. He tightened his arm around my shoulders. She hasn't done a real day's work in 3 years, he added. $50 and someone else can take her home. On the screen behind us, Hale Meridian Events glowed in white letters above a photograph of Grant and Lauren Vale. Under Lauren's name were 2 words that had never belonged to her. Co-founder. My name appeared only in the printed program folded beside each place setting. Rebecca Hale, wife of the CEO, I looked toward the tables nearest the stage. 2 department heads I had hired were studying their glasses. A hotel executive I had known for 11 years stared at Grant with his mouth slightly open. Lauren stood beside the auctioneer, one hand resting on the podium, waiting to see whether the room would accept the version of our company Grant had just offered them. I lifted Grant's hand from my shoulder. "Are you finished?" I asked. His smile narrowed. Before he answered, a chair moved near the center of the room. Evelyn Price stood. North Star Hospitality Group was Hale Meridian's largest client. Its contracts accounted for almost a third of our annual revenue, and Evelyn, North Star's chief procurement officer, had never wasted words for effect. "Before anyone bids," she said, "could you explain why Rebecca's approval is still required on every North Star implementation schedule?" No one laughed that time. Grant turned toward her. "That language is outdated." Evelyn did not sit down. "Then I assume the amendment your office sent us will explain when Rebecca approved replacing herself." Lauren reached for the microphone. "We should keep the evening focused on the foundation." Evelyn looked at her, then at the screen identifying Lauren as co-founder. "I agree. The foundation matters." The auctioneer cleared his throat and announced the next lot with the speed of a man escaping a fire. Music started. Servers moved through the room. Grant leaned close enough for me to smell bourbon on his breath. "You made that awkward," he said. I didn't stand up. "You could have laughed." I stepped off the stage. Grant followed me into the corridor outside the ballroom. The doors closed behind us, reducing the music to a dull pulse. "It was a joke, Rebecca." "Then explain it to me." His jaw moved. "You've been absent for 3 years. Everyone knows Lauren has been running operations. I was with my mother. And the business kept moving. I kept working. From her house, a few calls, some documents. I thought of winter mornings at my mother's kitchen table, reviewing emergency plans while she slept after chemotherapy. I thought of negotiating a hotel shutdown from a hospital corridor. Grant had thanked me then. He had said no one else could have protected the North Star account. Now he adjusted his cuff and said, "You already agreed to step away officially. Tonight shouldn't have mattered this much. I agreed to no such thing." His eyes shifted past me toward the ballroom doors. "The investor deadline is Friday," he said. "Don't turn a bad joke into a business problem." That was the first moment I understood. The joke was not the most important thing that had happened that evening. Lauren came into the corridor carrying a tablet. "Grant, Evelyn is asking for the current service schedule." Then she looked at me. "You should sign tomorrow," she said, "before this becomes worse." "What am I signing?" Grant answered for her. "A routine restructuring." I did not ask another question in the corridor. I walked to the lobby, requested the contact information for the event videographer, and emailed him before I reached the coat check. "Please preserve the unedited recording of tonight's program, including the charity auction segment." I photographed the Gala program. I took a picture of the screen before the presentation changed. I saved the event invitation that described Grant as founder and Lauren as the executive who had built Hale Meridian's modern operations. I did not post any of it. Outside, the March wind off the river cut through my evening dress. I ordered a car and sat alone in the back seat, while downtown Chicago moved past the windows in bands of gold and black. 3 years earlier, my mother had called while I was reviewing a convention center expansion in Denver. She had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Grant told me to take whatever time I needed. He called my decision to step back from daily travel an act of love. I did not disappear from Hale Meridian. I approved vendor standards. I reviewed North Star's emergency response plans. I rebuilt the staffing model after a labor shortage. When a power failure shut down a national conference in Dallas, I stayed on the phone until 3 in the morning coordinating backup sites. But I stopped appearing in photographs. Grant attended industry dinners with Lauren. Interviews began describing him as the sole founder. My title moved from Chief Operating Officer to Strategic Advisor, then vanished from a company biography that I did not notice until months later. Each change had seemed too small to fight while my mother was dying. When I reached home, Grant had not returned. I changed clothes and opened my laptop at the dining room table. The current operating agreement was still in the shared governance drive. Several governance packets were there too. A folder labeled Strategic Transition returned an access denied message. I did not try to bypass it. I downloaded the documents I was authorized to see, saved them to a secure personal folder, and wrote down the time. Near midnight, an email arrived from Grant. "I'm sorry the wording went too far. We need to move forward tomorrow. The documents are attached." The subject line read, "Routine member consent." There were 68 pages. I did not open them that night. Grant came home after 1. He slept in the guest room without discussion. At 7 the next morning, he placed 2 cups of coffee on the kitchen island. "I shouldn't have called you useless," he said. "No, I had been drinking. You planned the slide. Lauren's title is marketing. You called her co-founder. People understand what that means. I founded the company with you." He rubbed his forehead. "This is exactly why we need the restructuring. You're emotionally attached to an old version of Hale Meridian." He opened his tablet and turned it toward me. A signature box waited at the bottom of a document. "The investor needs this by Friday." What does it do? It separates the growth division from the old operating company. It gives Lauren enough equity to stay. It reduces risk. For whom? For both of us. I turned the tablet back toward him. "I'll have independent counsel review it." His expression changed more than it had when Evelyn stood up. "Independent from whom?" he asked. "I'm your husband." "That's why." He pushed his coffee away. "You have not been involved enough to understand the transaction. Then you should be comfortable giving me enough time to understand it. The deadline is real. So is my signature." Grant stood. "You are letting a stupid joke threaten 15 years of work." "No," I said. "I'm reading what you asked me to sign." After he left, I opened the packet. The first pages used words like modernization, continuity, growth platform, and strategic alignment. By page 12, the language changed. I was being asked to consent to the transfer of selected assets from Hale Meridian Events to a new company called Meridian Premier Group. I was being asked to release certain management rights and approve the movement of client relationships, intellectual property licenses, employees, and vendor arrangements. One paragraph stated that I had voluntarily withdrawn from active management and supported the transition of executive authority to Grant and Lauren. Another paragraph said Hale Meridian would retain existing obligations not specifically assumed by Meridian Premier. The document referenced an asset schedule. The schedule was missing. I sent Grant one sentence. "Please provide every attachment, schedule, valuation, and liability list referenced in the consent packet." He replied 6 minutes later. "Those are technical details. Company counsel can explain after you sign." Hale Meridian's longtime counsel represented the company, not me. I forwarded the packet to an attorney named Michael Torres, whom a retired hotel executive had recommended years earlier. I had never contacted him because I had never believed I would need a lawyer separate from my husband. At 10:30, Evelyn called. "I want to be careful about what I share," she said. "This is still a vendor relationship." I understand. North Star received a proposed contract amendment last week. It replaces your oversight role with Lauren and moves future services to Meridian Premier Group. I have not approved that. That is why I stood up. She sent me the amendment and Grant's covering email. The email said I had elected to retire from operations. and had approved a seamless transition to the new entity. It described Meridian Premier as the next stage of Hale Meridian's growth. Northstar had not signed. Our legal team had questions, Evelyn said. The new entity has no performance history. Your crisis management framework is part of the current agreement. We needed to know who owned it and whether the transition was actually authorized. I don't want you caught in a dispute between Grant and me. I'm protecting Northstar. The Gala only confirmed that the consent story may not be as simple as we were told. Her distinction mattered. She was not offering to rescue me. She was telling me that Grant's public joke had contradicted a business representation he had already made in writing. Keep the existing contract in place, I said. Do not take my side. Just don't accept an amendment until authority is clear. That is already what our legal team recommended. After we ended the call, I reread Grant's email to Northstar. He had not merely told a ballroom that I was useless. He had told our largest client that I had agreed to become irrelevant. Michael Torres met me that afternoon in a conference room overlooking Wacker Drive. He was a compact man with silver at his temples and a habit of reading a page twice before speaking. He placed the operating agreement beside the restructuring packet. You own 50% of Hale Meridian, he said. Grant has broad authority over ordinary management. That does not mean every decision requires your signature. It also does not mean your ownership disappears because you reduced your daily role. He tapped the transfer consent. This document asks you to approve more than ordinary management. The exact boundaries depend on the operating agreement, the contracts, and what is actually being transferred. We need the missing schedules. So I can stop it? I did not say that. The correction embarrassed me, but it also made me trust him. He continued. You can withhold consent where your consent is required. You can demand the information material to that decision. We still need to identify what Grant can do without you, what he cannot, and what has already happened. Then he asked whether I had signed personal guarantees. 15 years earlier, Grant and I had pledged everything we could to buy staging equipment, lease office space, and establish a working capital line. Over time, the company grew. We refinanced twice. I assumed the guarantees had fallen away with the old loans. I had never verified it. Michael requested the current loan documents. By the next morning, Hale Meridian's controller sent them after company counsel confirmed my right to receive records relevant to the proposed consent. One guarantee remained active. It supported an equipment and working capital facility with a balance large enough to make my hands cold when I read it. Michael pointed to the language. This does not mean the lender can demand the entire amount from you tomorrow. It means your exposure is governed by these terms if the company defaults and the guarantee is enforced. You should not assume moving assets to a new company releases you. Grant had spent 3 years calling me retired, inactive, and unnecessary. My name was still useful on the debt. Before I went near the office, Michael asked me to reconstruct the governance decisions I had stopped paying attention to. We reviewed 3 years of amendments, written consents, and meeting minutes. I had not signed away my ownership, but I had approved changes that gave Grant wider operational authority. One amendment allowed him to negotiate financing within stated limits. Another let him appoint executive officers without a separate vote. I had signed both from my mother's dining room. The signatures were mine. Grant had sent summaries with each packet. I had read the summaries, scanned the signature pages, and told myself I would study the full documents when my mother was stronger. She never became stronger. That was careless, I said. It was a governance mistake, Michael replied. It did not authorize anyone to invent your consent to a different transaction. The distinction kept me from hiding behind either extreme. I was not a helpless stranger to the company. I was an owner who had failed to monitor authority closely. Grant's plan depended on that failure, but the plan was still his choice. The minutes also showed when the public story began changing. 2 years earlier, Grant had proposed naming Lauren Chief Growth Officer. The minutes described her as responsible for client acquisition and modernization. They did not call her a founder. 6 months later, a marketing deck referred to Grant and Lauren as the leadership team behind Hale Meridian's expansion. The word co-founder appeared for the first time in a draft press release 7 weeks before the gala. No member consent approved that history. It was branding, not an ownership record. Michael marked the documents in separate columns. "What does this prove?" he asked. "That the title changed gradually. What does it not prove? That Lauren owns the company, or that Grant planned the entire transfer when the first title changed." He nodded. That exercise became the rule for everything that followed. A slide could prove what guests were shown. An operating agreement could establish ownership and authority under its terms. A guarantee could establish potential exposure. None of them could speak beyond its own page. We also reviewed the company's latest internal organization chart. My name appeared under Legacy Advisory, a box with no employees and no defined authority. Lauren's name sat directly below Grant's, connected to operations, growth, client strategy, and transition planning. The chart was not a legal transfer. It explained why employees had begun treating my role as ceremonial. I remembered approving a staffing change the previous winter, after Lauren emailed me that Grant was unavailable. She had thanked me for responding so quickly. 2 weeks later, a company newsletter praised the leadership team for solving the same problem without mentioning me. At the time, I told myself the outcome mattered more than the credit. That belief had been convenient for everyone except me. Michael asked for a list of people who could verify my continuing work without being recruited into a marital dispute. I gave him the names of the controller, 2 retired project directors, and North Star's former operations liaison. He did not call them immediately. Records came first. Witnesses would be useful only where the records left a real question. Then we created a document log. For every file, we recorded where it came from, when I received it, and whether I was authorized to possess it. I had spent my career teaching teams to preserve a clean operational trail during emergencies. Applying the same discipline to my own life felt both familiar and humiliating. By the time we finished, I no longer wanted to storm into Hale Meridian and demand that everyone remember me. I wanted to know exactly what remained mine, what belonged to the company, what Grant could manage, and what he needed me to approve. That afternoon, I went to Hale Meridian's office for the first time in 6 weeks. Lauren met me at reception. "Your access badge was changed when you moved to advisory status," she said. "I'm an owner. You are not an employee in active operations." "Then have company counsel explain which records I may review." She folded her arms. "You are turning governance into theater because Grant embarrassed you. The theater was his." I waited in the glass lobby until counsel authorized supervised access to historical operational files and the records identified in my request. The first vendor manual I opened carried my name in the revision history. So did the emergency staffing matrix, the hotel shutdown protocol, and the implementation calendar North Star still required. The systems were not antiques. Employees had updated them. Lauren had added dashboards and renamed several categories. The core sequence remained mine. Identify the risk, assign authority, preserve a written trail, and make no promise that operations could not support. I had taught Grant those rules. A young project manager passed the conference room and stopped. "Rebecca," she said softly, "are vendors supposed to change their billing entity next month?" "Who told you that?" "Lauren's transition team. We were told you approved it." "I have not approved any transfer." Her face changed. I did not ask her to send me anything secretly. I asked her to direct any official questions to company counsel and to keep doing her current job until she received documented instructions. After she left, I examined the file directory. Several operational folders had been copied into a Meridian Premier workspace. I preserved screenshots of what I could lawfully see and left the originals untouched. Grant called before I reached the elevator. "You went into the office without telling me. I requested company records. You disrupted employees. I answered one question with the truth. The new company is a branding vehicle. Then why are vendors changing billing entities? Silence. Dinner tonight, he said. No lawyers. I'll explain it as your husband. We met at a restaurant where Grant and I had celebrated our first profitable quarter. He arrived early and chose the same table by the window. For 10 minutes, he spoke as though presenting to an investor. Hale Meridian, he said, had become burdened by old leases, equipment financing, disputes, and lower margin contracts. Meridian Premier would be leaner. It would attract new capital. It would allow the company to compete for larger hospitality groups. Lauren is essential, he said. She has relationships I don't want to lose. What does Hale Meridian receive for the contracts and systems moving out? The new company will support the old company. How? Shared services, management fees, cross-referrals. Where is that written? We have not finalized every agreement. What is Lauren receiving? Equity. How much? That is still being negotiated. In exchange for what? She is bringing over the client relationships. The sentence sat between us. Those relationships belong to Hale Meridian, I said. Relationships belong to people. North Star's contract is with the company. North Star stays because of me. Then why did Evelyn stand up? His eyes hardened. Because you let her believe there was a problem. She had the amendment before the gala. Grant leaned back. You have been gone so long that you do not understand who creates revenue now. I understand enough to ask what compensation Hale Meridian receives. You own half of Hale Meridian. You will benefit when its burden is reduced. You are moving revenue out and calling the debt a burden. That is an emotional interpretation. It is an accounting question. He reached across the table. Rebecca, I know the joke was cruel. I know Lauren's title should have been handled differently. But if you block this transaction, you could destroy the company because your pride was hurt. I looked at the hand that had covered mine through my mother's funeral. For years, I had treated the existence of tenderness as proof that Grant would not deliberately disadvantage me. Both things could be true. He could have loved me once. He could still be willing to use my trust now. Send the schedules, I said. Then I left before dessert. Public filings confirmed that Meridian Premier Group had been formed 9 months earlier. Grant controlled it. Lauren appeared in management documents. I held no interest. The company's stated purpose mirrored Hale Meridian's most profitable division, almost word for word. Michael reminded me that forming a new company did not prove wrongdoing. It proves the entity exists, he said. It proves who is listed. It does not prove which assets belong there or whether any transfer is valid. We asked Grant's counsel again for the missing schedules. They arrived 3 days later, labeled preliminary and confidential. North Star's account appeared on the second page. So did 4 hotel groups, 2 national convention contracts, the preferred vendor network, selected employees, the Meridian brand license for premium hospitality services, and what the schedule called operational systems and implementation materials. The list described nearly everything profitable as transferable growth assets. The liabilities were in a separate attachment. Hale Meridian would retain the equipment facility, the downtown office lease, 2 pending vendor disputes, several low-margin municipal contracts, and existing obligations not expressly assumed by Meridian Premier. My personal guarantee remained attached to the working capital facility. I read the pages twice. The first time, I saw an insult expressed in accounting categories. The second time, I saw the structure. Revenue would move. Debt would stay. Grant would control the new company with Lauren. I would continue to own half of the old company, whose value would be reduced while its obligations remained. The Gala joke had not created the plan. The joke had revealed the story Grant needed everyone to believe before the plan could work. Rebecca had stopped working. Rebecca wanted retirement. Rebecca had no meaningful role. Rebecca had approved her replacement. If those claims became ordinary enough, my signature would look like a formality instead of the surrender it was. A forensic accountant named Priya Shah built a side-by-side model using the draft schedules and current financial statements. She did not call Grant's transaction theft. She did not promise that Hale Meridian would fail. She showed us what the documents supported. Under Grant's projections, Meridian Premier would begin with several of Hale Meridian's strongest revenue streams, and many of its most experienced employees. Hale Meridian would retain costs that had historically been supported by those revenues. Future performance is uncertain, Priya said. The new company may succeed or fail. The old company may retain value we have not fully measured. But the proposed allocation is not neutral. What would my half be worth after the transfer? I asked. That requires a formal valuation. It would almost certainly be different from its value before the transfer. And the guarantee? Still governed by the lender documents unless the lender releases you or the obligation is replaced. I thought of Grant saying the restructuring would protect us both. It protected his future business from the old company's weight. It did not protect me from the weight he left behind. Michael drafted a formal notice stating that I had not approved the proposed transfers, had not voluntarily retired from ownership rights, and required complete information before any consent decision. We did not accuse anyone of a crime. We did not contact the press. We sent it to company counsel, Grant, Lauren, and the neutral representatives handling investor diligence. Grant's response arrived within an hour. You are too late. Employees and vendors have already been notified. The message frightened me until Michael read it. Notice is not the same as a completed transfer, he said. We verify what happened next. Selected employees had received draft offers from Meridian Premier. Several had been promised new titles and possible equity. Vendors had received transition notices telling them billing details would change after closing. Some client emails had already been sent. The notices stated that I had voluntarily retired. One senior operations director, Alicia Monroe, had not signed her draft offer. She asked company counsel whether her current employment agreement could simply be moved to a different entity. Her question forced the transition team to slow down. I did not call Alicia and thank her. I did not ask employees to choose sides. Through counsel, I requested a formal governance notice telling staff that the proposed transaction remained under review and that current duties continued until valid changes were documented. Lauren called me directly. You have terrified people, she said. I did not send the transition notices. You came back after 3 years and decided everything has to stop because your name is not on a slide. My name is on the operating agreement. You did not build what the company is now. I did not claim I did. Then let the people who did move forward. What equity did Grant promise you? She paused. That is confidential. Is it based on assets moving from Hale Meridian? I am bringing client relationships, a management team, and growth. Do you know which debts remain behind? I know this is a clean structure. Have you seen the guarantee schedule? The pause lasted longer. Lauren had helped prepare the public story. She had allowed herself to be called co-founder. She had accepted the idea that my caregiving years made my history available for replacement. But Grant had not shown her everything either. I suggest you review the full packet with your own advisor, I said. You are threatening me. No, I am refusing to negotiate your equity privately. The next day, Lauren requested documents from Grant's counsel that she had apparently never received. That did not make her innocent. It made the responsibility more precise. Grant began calling our daughter Emma the following weekend. Emma was 26 and lived in Seattle. She called me on Sunday morning sounding tired. Dad says you are shutting down the company because of what he said at the gala. He formed another company with Lauren 9 months ago. There was a pause. He did not tell me that. He is proposing to move selected contracts and assets into it. I do not own any part of the new company. Hale Meridian would keep several debts, including one I still guarantee. Can he do that? That is what the review is determining. Why didn't you know? The question hurt because it was fair. I trusted him to handle governance while I cared for Grandma, I said. Then I kept trusting him because admitting I needed independent review felt like admitting something about our marriage. Does that make this your fault? No, it explains how he had room to try. I sent Emma no private contracts. I asked her not to carry messages between us. Grant added relatives to a group text that evening. He wrote that I was allowing resentment to endanger hundreds of jobs. He described Meridian Premier as a solution we had discussed for months. He did not mention its ownership or the liability schedule. I responded once. The proposed transaction is under professional review. I have not approved a transfer of company assets or represented that I retired from my ownership. Please do not involve family members in confidential business matters. Then I muted the conversation. Grant threatened to suspend my distributions from Hale Meridian. Michael explained that distributions depended on the agreement, company finances, and lawful decisions, not on Grant's anger. He also warned me not to treat that answer as a guarantee of continued payments. Every clear answer now came with a boundary. I was learning to prefer that over comforting certainty. The intellectual property review brought another correction I did not want. I had created the crisis manuals, staffing systems, and implementation schedules, but many had been developed in my work for Hale Meridian. My authorship did not automatically make them my personal property. We need document-by-document analysis for some materials, Michael said. But your strongest position is not that everything valuable secretly belongs to you. I stared at the old manuals spread across his table. For several days, I had imagined stopping Grant by declaring the systems mine. It was emotionally satisfying. It was also too simple. They may belong to Hale Meridian, I said. Yes, and you own 50% of Hale Meridian. The company's assets should not be moved without proper authority, valuation, and treatment under the governing documents. The narrower argument felt less dramatic. It was stronger. Priya prepared a preliminary valuation range. She separated the existing company's contracts, workforce, brand, systems, obligations, and risks. She marked assumptions in yellow and unknowns in red. Grant complained that the range was inflated. His advisors complained that it ignored the possibility that clients might leave. Priya agreed that client retention could not be guaranteed. Then she asked why Grant's investor materials valued those same clients so highly when they were moving into Meridian Premier. No one answered directly. Michael proposed 3 paths. Grant could buy my interest at a value determined through an independent process with clear treatment of the guarantees. We could approve a balanced restructuring in which Hale Meridian received fair compensation and I received defined protection from liabilities left behind. Or the owners could pursue an orderly separation or sale of assets under a transparent process. None was painless. None was automatic. All were better than signing a missing schedule because my husband said Friday mattered. Grant rejected the options in a 12-page letter. He said his management authority allowed him to create Meridian Premier and develop new business opportunities. He said Lauren's equity was necessary to retain her. He said I had abandoned day-to-day operations and returned only after a personal humiliation. He said North Star would leave if I delayed the transition. Then the investor's due diligence questions arrived. The investor was not asking me to surrender my rights. It wanted confirmation of who owned each transferred asset, whether required consents had been obtained, how liabilities were allocated, and whether North Star had agreed to assignment. Grant had been using the investor deadline as a weapon when the investor was asking many of the same questions I was. North Star postponed its renewal meeting. Evelyn sent one carefully worded statement through North Star's legal team. North Star had not consented to assign its contract to Meridian Premier. It would continue under the existing Hale Meridian agreement, while authority and continuity were reviewed. That did not give me North Star. It removed Grant's ability to promise North Star to someone else without North Star's participation. A private review was scheduled for the following Thursday at a neutral conference facility. The first portion would address ownership, governance, assets, and liabilities. North Star representatives would join only for the contract-specific discussion. 2 nights before the meeting, I moved into a furnished apartment near the lake. Grant did not try to stop me. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom while I packed 2 suitcases. "Are you leaving me over a joke?" he asked. "I'm leaving the house while we decide what the marriage has become." I apologized. You apologized for the sentence. What else do you want? The truth without a deadline attached. He looked older than he had at the gala. I was trying to save the company. You were trying to save the parts you wanted. Everything I built is in danger. Everything we built. He shook his head as if I were insisting on a technicality. At the apartment, I watched the unedited Gala recording for the first time. The auction segment lasted less than 4 minutes. Before Grant called me useless, he had praised Lauren as the woman who would lead Hale Meridian into its next chapter. He had thanked her for building the future. Then he had turned to me and offered me to the room. The exact joke may have been spontaneous. The sequence was not. I watched my own face when employees laughed. I did not look weak. I looked confused because I had not yet understood that Grant's private plan and public story had finally met in the same room. His apology arrived by email while the video played. I am sorry. Whatever happens between us, please help me save the company we built. The words almost moved me. Then I noticed what was missing. He did not say he would stop the transfer. He did not say he had misrepresented my consent. He did not offer to protect me from the guarantee. He wanted my help saving the company by signing the version that saved him. I brought the video to the review, but Michael placed it at the end of our folder. It proves representation and context, he said. It does not decide the transaction. The night before the review, Priya sent a final index rather than another argument. It listed each proposed asset beside its current owner, the document supporting that conclusion, the consent question, and any third-party approval still needed. The index did not use words like betrayal or revenge. It used assigned, unassigned, disputed, guaranteed, valued, and unknown. I printed it and placed it on top of the Gala video. That order mattered. Grant's joke explained why I had finally looked. The index explained what the meeting could actually resolve. Michael also made me write down the outcomes I could accept. A fair buyout, a balanced restructuring, an orderly separation. I could not demand that Grant admit I had been the true genius behind every success. I could demand that my ownership not be transferred by a story he told about me. For the first time since the Gala, I slept more than 4 hours. The meeting began at 9. Grant sat across from me with company counsel. Lauren sat beside him with a separate attorney. Priya had 3 binders. A neutral corporate representative coordinated the agenda. For the first hour, no one discussed the Gala. We discussed authority. Grant had broad power to manage ordinary operations under the agreement. He did not have unlimited authority to treat Hale Meridian's property as his personal inventory. Some proposed actions clearly required additional approval. Others depended on contract language, valuation, and facts still being established. We discussed ownership. I owned 50% of Hale Meridian. That did not make me the personal owner of its laptops, manuals, or client contracts. It gave me an economic and governance interest defined by the operating agreement and applicable rules. We discussed Meridian Premier. Its formation was not itself prohibited. The issue was what Grant intended to move into it, for what value, under whose authority, and with which liabilities left behind. We discussed the guarantee. The lender had not released me. Any settlement that promised a release would still require the lender's agreement or satisfaction of specified conditions. No one announced that I had won. Instead, the room produced a map. Green tabs marked facts the record supported. Yellow tabs marked disputed interpretations. Red tabs marked actions that could not proceed cleanly without unresolved consent or third-party approval. Grant watched the binders fill with tabs. "This is paralysis," he said. "It is due diligence," the neutral representative replied. Grant turned to me. "You wanted to prove I was wrong in front of everyone. There are 9 people in this room, and all of them signed confidentiality agreements." His face tightened. At 1:30, Evelyn entered with North Star's attorney. Grant shifted immediately into presentation mode. "North Star's relationship is with our leadership team," he said. "Meridian Premier provides continuity. Lauren and I have managed the account for years." Evelyn opened the current agreement. "North Star's relationship is with Hale Meridian Events," she said. "The agreement contains assignment and material change provisions. We have not consented to move it. The service team will be the same. Some personnel may be the same. The proposed provider is not. Rebecca has not managed the account in years. Evelyn turned several pages. Rebecca's operational framework remains embedded in the implementation schedule. Your proposed amendment removes her approval role and replaces the contracting entity. That role is outdated. Then it can be amended through a process both parties accept. Grant looked toward Northstar's attorney. This is a domestic disagreement interfering with business. No, Evelyn said. This is a vendor asking us to approve a different company before ownership and authority are clear. She placed the proposed amendment beside the existing contract. Before Northstar signs anything, which company actually owns the system we contracted for? And who has authority to transfer it? It was the same kind of question she had asked at the gala, but there was no ballroom silence this time. There were pages to review, definitions to apply, and people taking notes. Grant could not answer by calling me retired. He could not answer by pointing to Lauren's title. He had to acknowledge that Hale Meridian owned assets, that I owned half of Hale Meridian, and that Northstar had rights under its own contract. Northstar did not cancel. It did not award me anything. It kept the current agreement in place and withheld consent to assignment while the owners resolved the proposed transfer. The investor paused its commitment for the same reason. Well, not because Evelyn rescued me, because Grant could not deliver clean ownership of assets and contracts he had already promised. The negotiations lasted 7 weeks. Grant rejected the first valuation, then the proposals requiring Meridian Premier to compensate Hale Meridian and address my guarantee. Each refusal returned us to the same fact. He could pursue new business, but he could not cleanly move the old company's best value, leave its obligations behind, and call my approval routine. Lauren hired separate counsel when she learned her promised equity depended on the transfer. She removed co-founder from her biography and negotiated her own employment terms. That correction did not erase her choices, but it showed Grant had promised her more than he alone could deliver. I respected the distinction without confusing it with forgiveness. Grant and I met once with a marriage counselor at his request. He apologized again for the gala. I was drunk and angry, he said. I wanted you to feel how abandoned I felt when you left operations. I did not abandon operations. I changed how I worked while my mother died. You chose her over us for 3 years. The counselor asked what he meant by us. Grant spoke about dinners I missed, conferences Lauren attended, decisions he made alone, and the resentment that grew each time someone asked where I was. For the first time, I heard an honest feeling without accepting the conclusion he built from it. You were lonely and angry, I said. That did not give you permission to rewrite my ownership. I thought you wanted out. You prepared documents saying I wanted out before asking me. I knew you would resist change. You knew I would resist this change. He looked down at his hands. The joke lasted 15 seconds, he said. What you built around it took years. We did not schedule a second counseling session. The eventual settlement was not the ending either of us had imagined. Grant agreed to buy my interest in Hale Meridian through a structured arrangement. An independent valuation set a range, and the final number reflected client retention risk, debt, current performance, and the value of the assets Meridian Premier wanted to use. The payment would be made over time, secured by terms Michael insisted I understand before I initialed a single page. Hale Meridian received defined compensation for assets and licenses transferred to Meridian Premier. The agreement identified which operational materials the new company could use and under what terms. It did not pretend every process belonged personally to me. My personal guarantee was not erased by a sentence in our settlement. The lender reviewed the transaction separately. Grant refinanced part of the facility, and the buyout closing was conditioned on written confirmation that I had been released from the specified guarantee. Until that confirmation arrived, I did not sign the final transfer. Grant accused me of moving the goalposts. Michael placed the first draft beside the final conditions. The guarantee has been the goalpost from the beginning, he said. The lender's release came on a Tuesday afternoon. The final signing took place in a small conference room. not a courtroom and not a ballroom. Grant sat across from me with no microphone between us. He reviewed the settlement for the third time, though I knew he understood it. 50%, he said quietly. You really believe you earned half? I own half. The valuation accounts for what the company is worth, not what either of us says we deserve. You walked away. I stepped back from travel. I did not donate my interest. He looked at the signature line. At the gala, he had offered me to strangers for $50 because he believed the number attached to me was his to set. Now he needed my informed signature on a settlement that valued the ownership, obligations, and work he had tried to compress into the word useless. I signed after Michael confirmed the final documents matched the negotiated terms. I did not smile at Grant. I did not tell him he should have known better. I asked for my copy. When I left the building, I stood on the sidewalk for several minutes, holding a folder against my coat. I expected triumph. What I felt was grief with edges. I had helped build Hale Meridian from 2 desks and a rented printer. I knew where the first vendor contracts had been stored. I remembered Grant sleeping under a conference table during our first national event because we could not afford another hotel room. Protecting my share did not make losing that life painless. It made the loss mine to choose. Our legal separation proceeded apart from the business settlement. The company documents did not decide the marriage, and the marriage did not rewrite the company documents. Grant continued leading Hale Meridian, while Meridian Premier developed under the restrictions and licenses in the settlement. North Star remained with Hale Meridian during its review period. It did not guarantee a lifetime renewal. Lauren stayed through the transition. Whether she joined Grant's new company later was no longer my decision. I rented a small office near the lake. It had 1 narrow conference room, desks, and a window facing the brick wall next door. I named the consultancy Hale Operations Advisory at first, then changed it before filing the final paperwork. I had spent too many years allowing a shared surname to carry more meaning than the agreements underneath it. The sign on the door read, Rebecca Hale Operations and Crisis Planning. My first clients were small, a regional museum preparing for a major exhibition, an independent hotel group rebuilding its emergency procedures, and a convention organizer whose staffing model had failed twice. I did not build a rival empire overnight. I wrote scopes of work, corrected invoices, bought my own software, and hired an accountant before an assistant. No shared passwords, no informal guarantees. No agreement called routine because someone loved me. Evelyn did not hand me North Star's business. Months later, she gave a regional hospitality group my public contact information. They need what you actually do, she said. The rest is between you and them. That let me earn the work on my own terms. 6 months after the gala, I attended a luncheon for women in hospitality operations. It was held in a modest private room above a restaurant, with no auction stage and no giant company screen. The host checked her card before introducing me. Rebecca Hale, she said, founder and operations advisor. The title was not enormous. It was accurate. After the panel, I returned to my office and found a message from Grant. We are planning the next company gala. Will you attend? I think it would show people there are no hard feelings. I read it twice. 6 months earlier, I might have spent an hour shaping a reply that protected his reputation, reassured employees, and made me seem gracious enough to deserve what I already owned. I typed 1 sentence. No, but I hope the auction raises more than $50. I set the phone face down. On my desk was a contract for the regional hospitality group Evelyn had referred. The scope defined my work. The payment schedule matched the milestones. The ownership clause stated exactly which materials the client would receive and which tools remained part of my practice. There were 2 signature lines. One belonged to me. The other belonged to a client who had read the same terms. No one was signing for a spouse. No one was promising assets owned by someone else. No one was using love as a substitute for consent. Outside my window, the afternoon light moved slowly across the brick wall. I signed my name, saved the document, and returned it.